And thank you so much for staying with us. We are talking politics following the Prime Minister's announcement of the election day. If you somehow missed it, it's going to be September 3 with nomination day on August 18. And I'd mentioned in terms of why August 18, that's because ROPA, the Representation of the People Act, says that nomination day has to be at least 5 clear days after the announcement of the election day. What that means is that you can't count the day of the announcement, you can't count nomination day, so it could not have been earlier than Monday, August 18. One of the things the Prime Minister announced as well, though, is that we're going to be having local government by-elections on the same day. Take a look.
I also wish to inform you that local government by-elections in the Chancery Hall Division, the Olympic Gardens Division, the Seabright Gardens Division, and the Denham Town Division will be held concurrently with the general election in those constituencies.
Labour right, we ready now. Labour right, we ready now. Ring the bell, let every now. Ring the bell, let every now. Labour right, we ready now.
I will ask the Minister of Local Government to formally make the announcement.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Just to advise that after consultation on a letter written by Kingston's mayor, we have taken the decision to endorse the announcement made by the most Honorable Prime Minister. So all 4 divisions on election day will have their rightful representation.
So local government elections are normally announced by the local government minister. The Prime Minister, I think, kind of stole his thunder a little bit there. And then Minister Mackenzie basically just coming on to endorse and to confirm the announcement already made by the Prime Minister. Now, this is something people have been saying for a long time. Why we can't have local government elections on the same day as general and save money? This is just, quote unquote, just by elections, so Milton. But I don't know. It could be, I don't know if it's a first step towards active.
Yeah, in fact, I don't recall any local government by-elections, and Earl can obviously come in on this at all in previous general elections that we've had by-elections, and these, have been out for some time. 2 of them are in the Prime Minister's constituency, Seabright Gardens and Olympic Gardens, and Chancery in Dwayne Smith, that's the Northwest St. Andrew, Nigel Clark's old seat, and Denham Town, obviously, in West Kingston. So they're all in Jamaica Labour Party seats. And I believe the JLP are expected to win all 4. They should be able to win them comfortably, using past voting patterns.
Yeah, Earl?
Yes, I can't recall it ever having been done before, but it is indeed in keeping with what has been recommended by so many interest groups over the years. And based on what Mr. Mackenzie said, it seemed that he had the concurrence of the People's National Party as well, certainly from the mayor. It sounded as if the mayor, who is a member of the People's National Party, concurred with the government ongoing in this direction.
Okay, there was another point you wanted to raise, Earl?
Yes, let me say that I wasn't necessarily expecting the Prime Minister to bring this up tonight, but my perspective, I perceive that both parties are studiously avoiding a particular issue because it is so sensitive. And at some point, they need to be asked upfront where they stand on how they will deal with an increasingly erratic Trump administration or respond to the sort of erratic actions of Donald Trump over the next 3 years, because he's so unpredictable. And we saw what happened with the tariffs. And therefore, significant areas of Jamaican policy operations could be affected by the whims and fancies of Donald Trump, who I believe, according to how he operates, even if he has never heard of President James Monroe, it seems that the Monroe Doctrine is back in vogue under his administration.
Yes, and on that point, perhaps, Earl, linking to therefore this issue of the manifestos and whether or not that would be covered in them. As Dwayne indicated, the People's National Party has said they're launching their manifesto on Tuesday. And again, it's something I'd have to check, but it sounds to me like one of the earliest I've heard of a manifesto being launched. It's normally about 2 weeks before the election, if we're lucky, Milton.
Indeed, and for this to come out before nomination day, I was quite surprised when I saw the notification, I think earlier today or yesterday, that the PNP will be launching their manifesto on Tuesday. And particularly also since the PNP have been saying they're reluctant to tell the country what they're planning to do going forward because they're afraid that the Jamaica Labour Party will steal their ideas. I think that was a misstep. I think the PNP should have been putting elements of their manifesto out in the months that they've been campaigning, so that it would have been clearly articulated, clearly put forward to the people and to the voters. And for now that, election is called, that they'll be consolidating and, just putting together a final document and encompassing everything that they've been laying out before by the party officials on their campaign over the last few months, in fact, from last year.
And let me just say quickly what I have been saying, that when you hear people now calling for manifesto, I don't think anybody seriously think that can only mean a 20 or 30 page booklet or book. Clearly, it has to mean sharing those ideas across social media, using videos, using all kinds of different means. The points that people have been making is that it's time to tell us what you plan to do. Earl, comment on this issue of manifesto.
I sometimes wonder at the utility of it, given that so many aspects of it are quickly forgotten, or some of the goals set out are not easily attainable. I would also say, Milton, that the timing, or if you put out your manifesto too early, it's a double-edged sword, in that, particularly for an opposition, because the government having the power of the purse and the power of saying we are in a position to implement X or Y, or to respond with a counter policy. And also, perhaps the most significant policy promise or idea that came out of the Jamaica Labour Party in opposition in 2016 was that having to do with the income tax threshold, which was a real winner, it seemed, with the populace. And that came at the 11th hour, so to speak, heading into the election. And in fact, it wrong-footed the PNP and might have been a major factor in the PNP narrowly losing that election.
Yeah, the PNP, I thought, absolutely messed that one up in terms of the response. They thought it was nonsense. They clearly thought it was unattainable. They didn't think people were taking it seriously, while it was catching public attention.
Indeed.
And there was never, until maybe way too late, a comprehensive and solid attempt at a serious response from the PNP.
Oh, definitely on that one. And I agree with Earl. I think it's a fair point that you don't want to put too much of your manifesto out. But, that issue, though, points to another problem which I think the PNP has, which is how different are you, certainly on economic policy, from this government? And the answer to that really is no. The current economic policy was started by the PNP under Dr. Peter Phillips as Finance Minister, Portia Simpson-Miller as Prime Minister. And the government has continued and implemented it. They've maintained, the primary surplus, all the macroeconomic targets, continued with the debt to GDP ratio, despite, having a little shifting dates because of the COVID pandemic. So the PNP are in a bit of a bind. What different can we do or come to the nation regarding the economic policy, which generally is the core of what a government is going to put to the voters in terms of offering them an alternative? And the PNP are in a little bit of a difficulty because they are not too different, they're not different from what the current administration is implementing. I must say, I think it was last year early last year, the opposition did float the idea of reducing the primary surplus that the government has. I think it's at 5%, and they were suggesting it go to 3% or thereabouts. Don't hold me to those figures, but something along those lines, which would free up about $20 billion, Dion, for them to spend primarily on social programs. The architect of the current economic policy, Dr. Peter Phillips, their former leader, came out strongly and said no. He disagreed with his success and the current leadership of the PNP for that policy. I've not really heard them articulate it lately, so I'm wondering if that's something that they have shelved. And that's one of the challenges that I was alluding to earlier in making that point, that they're in a bit of a bind in terms of offering a clear alternative to the current economic policy. Mm-hmm.
Well, in the weeks now going up to September 3rd, both parties obviously are going to be probably knocking on your door, all of you people trying to get your vote. The PNP, again, I think has a steeper hill to climb. When you look at the 2020 figures, right? Yes, it was a COVID year. We only had a 38% voter turnout. But when you look at the number of voters the PNP lost compared to the JLP, the PNP got nearly 128,000 fewer votes than they had in 2016. The JLP numbers were less as well, but they were only about 29,000 less. So what you've seen over the past 2 election cycles is the PNP significantly losing numbers of votes. The JLP went up in 2016, down again in 2011. In 2020, in fact, their 2011 numbers were just about the same as their 2020 figures. So the question is, what does the PNP do now in the next few weeks
and Dion,
if they are to win?
Let me put it even more stark. Just a second, Earl. In 2016, there are in 2020, there are 133,000 persons who voted for the PNP in 2016 that didn't vote for them. In 2020, there are 158,000 persons who voted for the PNP in 2011 that didn't come out and vote for them, right? So that's well over 100,000. They lost 158,000 voters in 2020 that had voted for them in 2011. And when you compare it to the 2016 numbers, it's 133,000. For the PNP to be in this game, they need to get at least 140,000 voters back to voting for them to be competitive in this election.
And of course, they have to flip 18 seats as well to win. Earl, you were saying?
Well, on that point, I think it might be the better comparison perhaps might be with the 2024 local government election, in which the PNP won the national vote. And in fact, I think if you extrapolate from that in terms of the numbers, which I don't have in front of me now, but that was a significant improvement. And if you looked at the divisions across various constituencies, you will see that the PNP outperformed the JLP in significant divisions, even within constituencies that the JLP has done well in consistently. So I think that would be the point of encouragement for the PNP. As to whether they have built sufficiently on that over the ensuing year that is the important question.
But remember, Earl, despite them winning the popular vote, when you extrapolated the local government results of February 2024, the JLP actually would have won more seats on the constituency in the national map than the PNP. And if it were a general election, the JLP would still have formed government, albeit with a very reduced majority.
Which is why, Milton, I'm saying that the question is, to what extent have they built on the gains made at that point in 2024? And I think since then, they have been up and down in the polls. So I don't think we can completely arrive at a conclusion. What I would say is that is something for them to perhaps take some encouragement from, but ultimately, have they done sufficiently to build on that?
Now, in 2020, of course, we didn't see full campaigning. They couldn't have done full campaigning either party because we're in the middle of the COVID-19 pandemic at that point in time. So it's been then, since 2016, that's 9 years since the political activists have really been out there. And I think you can see them on the campaign trail. You can see that they're thoroughly enjoying the process. But in terms of voters and what has to be done now to win over the voters, tell me what you both are expecting to see, what we need to see over the next few weeks. Milton?
I think we want to see more engagement, and certainly of the young people, and engagement of independent voters as well. In some way, I think the parties, particularly the PNP, have been really talking more to their base rather than the nation. And
I think that's because of the figures you are trotting out, that they're trying to get back that base.
Yes,
and
yes.
They probably think it doesn't make any sense at this point going so much after the uncommitted if they can't pull back their own voters.
And indeed, they would have to get their base back, as that's the base for them to start,
right.
The foundation. But yes, so I think they need to broaden the message, to talk to more of the uncommitted, the independent voters and the young people. Jamaica is a young population, and the voters list is certainly skewed towards them. And any party that hopes to become victorious in a general election need young people. Old people, yes, or older folks tend to be reliable voters. They tend to be the ones to go out and vote, but there are far more young people there than older voters. So they need to engage them, and I expect to see more, rather than mass rallies, but more, focus groups, spot meetings where they're speaking to smaller crowds. I expect to see far more political advertisements on television and in the mass media as well as, of course, in social media.
Of course, Earl, you're based in rural Jamaica now. Tell me what kind of activities you've been seeing and expect to see.
I've seen some spot meetings in various communities, Dion, and for me, I would say that is more effective. As far as these mass rallies are concerned, and one can understand a mass rally such as we had tonight in Halfway Tree, and I suspect the PNP will hold an equivalent one at some point in the near future. However, I find these mass rallies, to be not particularly effective at convincing people. At least that's how I perceive it. They are more the theater of the absurd. And you wonder, do these parties and their leaders, do they caucus before they go to they go off to these rallies, to these mass meetings? Do they sit and think about what it is they want to convey to the people and how they will do so? Do they understand that in 2025, more so than ever before, they are not just communicating with the committed, they're on the ground with them. Some of whom have followed them from every nook and cranny of the island. So even in the particular locale that they're having that meeting, they aren't only speaking to a small percentage of the people in the particular constituency. So what's the point of a lot of what we see and hear at these rallies? I think they come away much the loser for some of the nonsense that happens at these rallies, rather than advancing their cause, as they would do, I suspect, in smaller spot meetings and engaging with the people.
Okay, so I know Milton wants to come in on this. I have to say this is one of those areas where I don't necessarily agree with Earl, because I think different fora are for different things, and I do not. It's no longer confined to that particular theater.
No, I understand you. People, and what do we focus on the following morning?
Earl, I understand you, but a mass rally, I don't care what them go up there and say. A mass rally is not a place for trying to convince anybody of anything. It's a place for precisely what we've been talking about. Energizing your base, getting your party workers active, getting people in your party to feel that you are on a roll and that it makes sense for them left their yard, go work for you, and go vote on election day. You cannot at the same time be appealing to people like, hold on, Earl, come in. You cannot at the same time be appealing to people who sit down in them bed and watch it on YouTube. You cannot do both things effectively.
And my response to that is, if for the next 2, 3, 4 days thereafter, you have to be explaining yourself because you misspoke or you said something so ridiculous that it has left the wider populace incensed, what did you achieve ultimately?
That's a different point.
Right.
That's not the issue of a mass rally itself. That's the issue of the nonsense when they talk when they get up on stage. Yeah. But you can have a mass rally without people putting their foot in their mouth. Yeah. Unbelievable as it might seem.
We're not having that.
Earl, I'll disagree with Earl on this one, although I do think we do need to have smaller meetings. First of all, I think there's a tradition in this country. It's part of our political culture. And in the past, a lot more persons used to go to rallies, just walk to the one in your area, drive to the one in your area. Now there's a lot of busing, which is part of, mobilizing and energizing your base. I was in Montego Bay this weekend, Dion, and this afternoon I saw a crowd by Iron Shore and about 8 buses, obviously, waiting to take them in. And they're just, having a good time, taking pictures and playing some music. And that's part of the, the energizing and feel good. You go into a rally and for many people, it's fun. You're going to town, you're going to Spanish Town or wherever to have a good time, or Montego Bay.
Maybe we should ask Earl if he thinks politics is fun. Earl?
It can be.
Everything can't serious, Earl.
Yeah.
What's that?
Everything can't serious.
No, you are missing my point, Dion. You are missing my point. And you and I have known each other so long that you
also
understand the point I'm making.
It's a Caribbean thing also, because
you can have fun without making an absolute fool of yourself.
And I agree I'm not arguing with you at all. Remember, I did say you can have rallies without this constant putting your foot in your mouth and ending up with a lawsuit on your desk.
Yes. May I make one point quickly? I think we have all ignored so far the fact that September 3 will have implications for the new school year, the start of the new school year.
Yeah.
Yes, the new school year, I'm advised, normally starts on the first Monday in September. This year, the first Monday is the 1st of September, in fact.
Yes.
So
what I've heard is that they may push it back to the 8th or start it on the Thursday or probably Friday, because the election day will be on the Wednesday, September 3. I at one point thought and heard that they were considering the 10th or the 9th, those dates, which the school would have started for a week because the party wanted to see how the new rural school bus system would have played out and to try and get some mileage from that. They have obviously decided not to do that and go for September 3. But it is a problem. Of course, you could always, extend the term at the end or at the midterm, so it can be made back up pretty easily. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and the issue there, I suspect tomorrow, well, I know our newsroom obviously will follow up on the issue tomorrow. I suspect by tomorrow we'll hear a statement coming out from the Education Ministry. They probably have it prepared already, couldn't send it out until the election date announced. I'm pretty sure we'll be able to get that information for our viewers for tomorrow. Yes. In relation to the rural school bus system, now I think this was supposed to be a center point of the JLP's achievements for the term, and they're being dogged by controversy. People are sending videos, this one happened to this one happened to this one, and we see them pushing back. But Earl, what do you see in terms of this particular issue, how it may or may not play?
It probably, I don't think the Prime Minister addressed it directly tonight, because it has become quite contentious, and there are positives and negatives. Certainly the idea of providing a school bus system for our students cannot be ignored. It's an important policy issue. And when I say the Prime Minister did not touch it directly, he did speak of a transport system for the students. But in respect of the controversy surrounding the initiative that was recently announced by the minister and some of what we have been seeing of the school buses, the yellow buses that have been brought in, I think that is going to continue to be fodder for the campaign.
The other thing that I thought, and Earl alluded to it just now, is he announced that there will be free transport for all students, including tertiary students, for the first 2 months of the school year, September and October. Again, that's a direct response, Dion, to the cries of the issues that students are having getting to school across the island, and particularly in rural Jamaica. And of course, the cost of parents who have to find, if you have 3 kids, that could be as much as $1,000 one way for all 3 children just to go to school. And that's a significant sum for many parents.
Yes, you mentioned though, September and October, the Prime Minister announced free transportation to all school children, including tertiary, which obviously tracks with the election, that announcement around election. The issue as well, just to say, I think there still are questions to be asked about what's happening with these rural school buses. And I agree with Earl, as somebody who grew up in country as well, I think everybody understands the importance of a rural school bus system, but there are questions to be asked about what's happening, and I think the response that generally is being given, say a bad mind, people are bad mind, the bus them, really, that's not sufficient, and we need to push past that. Mm-hmm.
Yes. The other thing I'd want to raise, Dion, is what I consider, I found it, they've done it before, but it was a real frontal attack, albeit in a subtle way, by the Prime Minister against the opposition leader and the senior PNP member, Peter Bunting, about them benefiting from the high interest rate policy in the 1990s. And, of course, that's part of the challenge that the government then experienced, which led to FinSec and the collapse of the sections of the financial sector. And it seems to be, to me, a direct response to the attacks or the criticisms of his, challenges that he's having with his statutory declarations and the investigations for illicit enrichment, etc., etc. And he went on, he spent some time on this and said, I didn't make my money on the backs of the Jamaican people. I'm not a tapanaris. I said I bought 2 taxis and then I opened a taxi company. I think that was the first time I've ever heard him say something like that. I didn't know that he did. And then he also said... That
came out in the Craig Berry's
affidavit. But I mean, for him to say it publicly here.
Okay.
And then he said...
wrap you up in 30 seconds.
He went through the Jamaican struggle and so on. So that, to me, seems to be a direct response to those criticisms, and that perhaps you'll see and hear more of that on the campaign trail.
I know that the PNP is going to have to respond. Earl, 10 seconds, final comment.
Well, I look forward to the rest of this campaign season. In fact, I look forward to it being over and done with, and we can move on with our lives thereafter with whatever choices the people of Jamaica have made.
And I think a lot of Jamaicans would say, and so say all of us. All right, we're going to have to leave it there. Thank you so much for having been with us for this panel discussion. Post-election date announcement. Just to remind you, nomination day, August 18, and the election day will be September 3. Stay tuned, of course, to our newsrooms, our platforms. We'll continue to bring you all the information on the election as it continues to unfold. I'm Dion Jacksmill on behalf of news and production teams. Have a great evening, folks. Stay safe. Give thanks.